Hello and welcome to The Enthusiasm Project, Season 2, Episode 14. My name is Tom, and today we are going to talk about a subject that I've been wrestling with for a long time, but we're going to look at it through the lens of insecurity, because I think that all of us, in one way or another, all of us are always dealing with insecurities and our own insecurities. And I have noticed over the past couple years, especially, just how much of my behaviors are affected by my insecurities, way more than I realized, and how really your insecurities are just in your own brain, and it's not like a concrete law of the universe or anything. And it's just sort of interesting, but it's all framed through the lens of filmmaking versus video production, which might not seem like those two things make sense, but I promise they do. So, like most people, I have dealt with my share of insecurities throughout life, but it wasn't really, especially until my fiance Heather and I met 3 years ago, that like I started, taking control of them, I guess. There had just been so many things that I had always felt insecure about, or that I was, nervous or anxious about, or if I did something, I'd be worried that it would look stupid or people would say I'm stupid, mostly because those things had happened in the past. And Heather and I met in an interesting way. I've told this story before. I met through YouTube, which is kind of a fluke. Like there's really, in any other time period ever, there's no reason we would have ever come together or met. But thankfully, in 2017, we were able to. And part of that meant that when we met, she was somebody that was not part of my social circle, my universe at all. Like she was completely outside of that. We lived in different places. We were not connected in any way. And so she kind of came in and just had this fresh perspective on everything that I had become so accustomed to. And there were just so many times, like the first year of our relationship was literally just her being extra patient with me and reminding me like, no, it's okay. No, it's not stupid. No, you can try this. Like, it's okay. And me having to learn that it was okay. And doing that, what I realized was, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I have done or not done that aren't because of any, specific reason or anything other than me getting stuck and caught up in my own head. And once you kind of knock down that barrier, it really opens up a lot, and it's very freeing in an interesting way. And I can't help but just sort of think of how much behavior and how much of our patterns and behavior and everything are dictated by these thoughts and feelings that aren't necessarily accurate, or I don't want to say legitimate, because of course your feelings are legitimate, but you kind of know what I'm saying with that. So I'm going to jump into this by the reason that I'm talking about this subject today is because in my idea notebook for YouTube videos, I've had a video idea called Filmmaking versus Video Production just sitting there for months now. And it's just kind of a blank page because it's a topic I wanted to talk about, but I didn't really know how to approach it. And so it's just something that's been kind of ruminating. And then one of my favorite YouTube creators, whose name is Gary, and his channel is The Everyday Dad. So he does, tech and photo and stuff, kind of similar to the topics that I cover, but from a different perspective. And his channel has grown a lot lately. He recently, very recently, passed 100,000 subscribers and is now well on his way to 200,000, I'm sure, by the middle of this year. And because of that, it's interesting because he's such a friendly, down-to-earth guy. And, we've chatted online several times and through direct messages and stuff. And I follow his Twitter, and he's super active on Twitter. But it's interesting because I feel like he and I have very similar perspectives on things, and we approach topics and we handle our channels very similarly. But his channel being more than 10 times the size of mine, he encounters and deals with things that I have not encountered yet. And it's very interesting. And one of them is a lot of his videos. Well, here, actually, let's preface that with this. The reason that I jumped into this today was because yesterday he sent out a tweet. If you want to follow him on Twitter, he's very entertaining and he's very active. It's just at everyday underscore, or no, sorry. It's at every underscore day dad. And yesterday he tweeted a thing that said, I'm pretty sure my content will be pivoting as we go forward. Yes, the views are up covering iPad computer related topics, and that's good. But what's really pushed me over the edge is how much more positive the comments are and how nice the commenters are to each other. So he had gotten the new iPad Pro, made a video about it, which is different than what he normally covers, which is pretty much just like all cameras and lenses, very similar to the stuff that I talk about. And he's kind of notorious for like switching out, selling and rotating gear in and out. So he's always testing new stuff. And then he got this iPad, the new iPad, did a video about it. The video did really well, and the people the video attracted were all really positive. And so he followed that tweet up with another one that said, so long story short, I probably won't be talking about cameras much in the future, and to continue my griping, nobody has complained about my lighting, told me my color correcting skills suck, whined that I like autofocus. Typing it all out makes me realize how exhausting the camera community can be. And I can tell you that his Twitter is not at all normally like complaining or anything. It's all very like jokey and interesting and fun and entertaining, but there's just been this exhaustion that he had mentioned several other times about like, he sort of gets this negative feedback for not being a quote unquote filmmaker, even though he never claimed to be, and that's not how he was approaching things. I mean, his channel is literally called The Everyday Dad. Like his tagline is, if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. That's not coming from the point of view of professional industry filmmaker. Like that's coming from a very hobbyist, like professional amateur, professional amateur, high level amateur, low level I don't know, but prosumer maybe was the term from like back in the late 90s. But it's coming from that point of view. And so the things that he talks about in cameras, when he does a camera review, he'll talk about things that are helpful for that, for making YouTube videos, stuff like a flip out screen or autofocus, those things that make it really helpful when you're making that kind of content. And then he gets a lot of feedback from people who come in and go like, no filmmaker in the world would care about a flip out screen or use this camera or need autofocus or blah, 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 blah. And he, to exhaustion was trying to explain, that's not what I'm trying to do. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm trying to be. And I guess this like filmmaking community just sort of became overbearing. And I had, he had mentioned little bits of that over the past few months. And I had even seen it. I'm in or I subscribe to the cinematography subreddit, where maybe like a month ago or more, somebody did a thing that was like, hey, can we just put all of the video production posts like separately or ban them or whatever? Because that's not what we're here for. And it got into this whole debate of like, we're real cinematographers, we're not video production people. And it left a bad taste in my mouth. Fortunately for me, I haven't really experienced much of this negativity, especially in the camera community. And again, my channel is much smaller, so just typically it seems like when you have a smaller channel, you tend to attract a more supportive audience, at least when you're starting out. So I appreciate that. But I've had a lot of fun, and I love cameras and stuff, so I love, and I've, been into them for so long that I just enjoy it so much. But my experience has been largely positive. And I think that even when you grow, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a negative audience, because I will say maybe also like about a month ago, Peter Lindgren, who's a Swedish YouTuber whose channel has just exploded over the past year, like literally a year ago, I think he had 800 subscribers and is now past 250,000. He just completely blew up, and he's just this one dude doing it all himself. He's a really nice guy. We talk a lot on Instagram, and I've used some of his work in my classes with my students because it's really clear, educational. He uses the same like Final Cut Pro and everything we use. And he did a video maybe like a month ago that was like 3 YouTube channels you should follow, or my favorite 3 YouTube channels, and he picked mine as one of them, which was kind of amazing. And so that day, I didn't know what happened. I woke up and I was like checking my phone, and I had all these notifications, all these comments, and my channel's been growing well lately, but the numbers were going up really fast in a way that is very abnormal. And I was like, why is this? Why? And I couldn't figure out what it was. And then somebody started leaving comments. It was like, Peter sent us. Peter sent us. I was like, okay. And then I went and checked my subscription feed, saw his video. It explained it. So a bunch of his audience came over to check out my channel and, subscribed and all that stuff, which was really, really cool. But I think in that day, and I mean, his content, my content, I wouldn't say that it's similar because we have totally different styles, but the genre is definitely similar. So if you like the stuff he talks about, it would make sense that you would like the stuff I'm talking about. He's not talking about, how to make these cool edited sequences and camera gear, and then you jump over to me and I'm talking about underwater basket weaving or something. Like we're still very much in line with one another. And I forget how many people I got. I think I got over 500 new subscribers that day, which is a lot for me. It's a huge number. And they were all nice. Everybody who said stuff was 100% positive. And I sent him a message that was like, thank you again for that. Like, I just need to let you know, though, everyone who has come over to my channel from your channel has been great. And he was like, I'm so glad they behaved themselves. But I know he's talked about getting, negative stuff. Everybody gets negative stuff, but that was really, it's only been positive. And I mean, the majority of comments I get are positive, even though they're from, that camera community. So it's even within a community, there's so much variety. Because going back to Gary, the Everyday Dad on Twitter, another person chimed in on his tweets about this. I'm not as familiar with this person, but it's at Bill Barclay. And Bill said, it's true, there's a whole quote-unquote camera-splaining faction who watch YouTube simply to denigrate others and prove how superior their knowledge of cameras is, and generally they have no content to back up their claims. Hard to do, but biting the tongue works best, I think. Just don't engage with them. So that was kind of his advice with dealing with that. So for Gary, he got so tired of it. Like, for example, one of his things is he likes to film his videos at 30 frames per second. And a lot of the camera community and the YouTube community that's into, more quote unquote cinematic stuff or, filmmaker, it's all 24 frames per second. Even I film at 24 just because that's what I think. It looks good, and the way my cameras are all set up, it looks good. And if it's not broke, I'm not going to fix it. Gary films at 30, and it is kind of literally like there's an angry mob with pitchforks coming at him for that. And he sticks to it because he likes it. When realistically, I don't think even I could tell the difference between 24 and 30. Maybe if my life depended on it and I could watch side-by-side videos over and over again, I could maybe then pick out which one was 24 and which one is 30. But for something like that in the camera world, it's this huge controversial thing that really, honestly, like, nobody can really actually tell the difference that quickly. And so I can understand why getting just constant, like, I can just understand why that would wear on you over time. And so after doing this iPad video and getting more positive things and doing a couple more videos like that, he's just sort of switching for now to talk less about cameras, even though he still loves them, and focus more on the stuff that he also likes that's bringing in a more positive audience. So the reason I bring that up is not because I want to switch what I'm talking about, but because it brings up that issue of video production versus filmmaking, which is this strange thing, especially now because technically video is a more accurate term because hardly anything is shot on film. So we're all kind of just doing video. But there's always been this line between, like, I make videos and I make films. And even some YouTube channels, especially in the more like cinematography, cinematic related area, they'll release, like a film where it might be a narrative, it might be a documentary, but it's a quote unquote film. And they've worked 4 months on it, 5 months on it. And their normal videos are really good, like amazingly good. And then they produce this thing that, like, I've been working on it for so long and blah, blah, blah. And here's the premiere. And you watch it and you're like, it's great. It's really good. Other than the fact you said that it took so long and maybe like the voiceover is a little more dramatic and the credits sequences are fancier, it is no different than a normal video you would spend 1 or 2 days on. Why is this a film and why is that a video? And I think a lot of it has to do with probably the intention behind it. So like Becky and Chris, another YouTube channel that I love. It's like, every time they upload a new video, I get so excited because it's perfect. It's just like so delicious and soothing and wonderful. But Chris, her husband, they're married, I think. Yes. He's a doctor, so he's been dealing with a lot of the COVID-19 stuff. He's on the front line for that. She has been self-isolating at home, but he's going to the hospital every single day. So she's been sharing online like some of the nerves and anxiety and not feeling comfortable making stuff. And they've kind of just started dipping back into making videos around everything just because they weren't comfortable with it and it's been so stressful. But one of the things she did was she made what she called a short film called My Distraction, which was just this silent video that showed her work, like doing some woodworking and photography and like DIY stuff. And that it was like a 3-minute film, just essentially the things that are distracting during times of stress and everything. And she called that a film and then did like a behind the scenes video on it. Everything they make is really high quality, but I think the intention there is different. So the film in that instance was not shot on film, but it was almost like a self-contained narrative. It had a specific purpose for a specific audience, and it was done maybe even more, because even YouTube videos have specific purposes for audiences. So I think this was done more with like an artistic intent, where I can't speak for Becky who made it, but for a YouTube video, you pay attention to views and analytics. I feel like something like this wasn't necessarily for views. It was more because it was something that she wanted to make, to share, to express, to deal with, to work through something. So there was more of this artistic side of it and less of the traditional like YouTube side of it. So maybe that's what the difference was. But I think that that's a healthy way to look at film versus video production. Like filmmaking, maybe it's a more artistic expression, whether it's narrative, whether it's documentary, and video production is more, there's artistic elements, but it's maybe a little more grounded in the everyday, or it's a little more practical, nuts and bolts maybe. I'm just kind of thinking of this off the top of my head, but maybe that's kind of where it goes. And I'd be okay with that differentiation. And I've always thought too of films, naturally as just sort of being longer processes. Like I love Better Call Saul. We're at near the end of the 5th season. It's like one of my favorite shows. I think I might even like it better than Breaking Bad. Anyway, if you haven't watched Better Call Saul, highly recommended. There's also a podcast that goes along with Better Call Saul where it's the writers, producers, editors talking about each episode. And it's great because it's like, as soon as the 45-minute episode comes out, you get this 2-hour commentary on it. And it just answers all the questions and you see all the work that goes into it. And a lot of that they will explain, there's always a handful of completely literally breathtaking shots in that show where you're just like, I can't believe this sequence or this angle or the shot or whatever blows my mind. And then they'll explain how they do it. And in that case, a lot of the times it's like that one shot or that one scene took, days of planning or weeks of location scouting. And the whole day of production was on this 1-2 second thing or whatever. And I've always kind of associated that with filmmaking, where it's just everything is so, you're creating this world that doesn't exist. And so there's so much work and effort that goes into making that reality feel real, that naturally in doing so, the time span extends. And so they just become long form projects. Whereas like a YouTube video, I can make a very high quality looking video, but I can do that in a day or half a day or whatever. And it's just sort of the scale of things, I think, is also a part in my mind of film versus video, although I don't know how fair or accurate that really is. But I can say for myself, there's always been this insecurity about whether I'm a filmmaker or just a video production guy. And I always wanted to be a filmmaker, but I always kind of knew I was a video production guy, and I felt very insecure about that, which is stupid. But the reason that I felt that way, I think for me, a lot of it came from, it was very deep rooted in the time that I just got into this stuff. So especially remembering like the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was like a teenager and trying to get good at stuff, but the tools that were available to me were, a Sony Handycam, like an 8mm Handycam. No matter how much time and effort you put into perfecting your angles and your shots and your movements and whatever with your Sony Handycam, it's just never going to look like the stuff that you see on the theater screen. It just isn't a thing that's possible. Whereas not even just in 2020, but for the last decade or more, people at home or people with, consumer budgets can get this equipment that, while it might not look the same exactly as a $50,000 or $100,000, filmmaking camera, it gets real close, maybe sometimes equally as good. And that means now a video person can create stuff that look like, film used to look. And so the line is very, very blurry. And that's why I think it comes down to more of intention of the project versus the actual equipment and stuff that you're using. Who really cares if you're shooting at 30 frames a second? Who cares what brand of camera you're using? It's what you're doing with it. But what I realized was, in my mind, I don't think I'm making films. I have almost now 200 YouTube videos, which I'm proud of, but I'll happily call those videos because I don't really think... There's even a few in there that are more, they're less YouTube-y and more story-driven, or not even necessarily narrative, but maybe with artistic intent, just like I talked about with Becky's video from Becky and Chris. And that is still, I still wouldn't consider that like filmmaking on my end personally. But what I've learned is what's wrong with being into video production. Like, what's wrong with making videos? It's really fun to make videos. I love making videos. I'm really good at it. If all I'm doing is making videos, one of the things I felt insecure about was that making videos just seemed to be less than filmmaking, but also filmmaking is this whole world that I don't know a lot about. I mean, I like to learn about it, but there's so much terminology, techniques, there's so much that I don't know about, that there's the insecurity of like, if I talk about this thing I don't really know about, someone's going to find out that I don't know about this stuff, and then I'm going to be like embarrassed or whatever. Whereas like, if I'm just making videos, I am very comfortable in my knowledge. I can know as much or as little as I want and be comfortable with it and make the best stuff that I can and just have a lot more fun with it. And I like that a lot more. So it's kind of strange of like letting go of this insecurity and just realizing first that video production doesn't mean the same thing that it did 20 years ago. You can still create amazing stuff that takes a lot of time and technique and skill. And it's not even necessarily less than filmmaking. It's just sort of a different side of a similar coin. It's like being in a band versus playing in an orchestra. Like, you're a musician who's creating music, but you're just doing it under different contexts with different purposes. And that's kind of how I've felt about it. And that's just been so nice because it makes it just makes such a difference in how you approach stuff and how you feel about things. And then it's fine then if somebody says, this is not what we would do in the industry. It's like, well, cool, because that's not what I'm trying to do. And I had that similar experience with audio-related videos recently. So when it comes to video production stuff, I feel comfortable enough. I think I feel comfortable enough, too, that a lot of like the negative comments that do come in, they sort of just roll off my back, even though, it's hard not to take stuff personally. But I know that I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I know that I'm good at it. I know there's room to grow, of course, but I'm confident enough in my knowledge and my skills and the work that I've produced and the work that I've done in it that if somebody comes in and says like, you're wrong about this one thing, and it turns out that I'm not wrong about the thing, I don't really worry about it that much. But with audio, I'm definitely more of a novice. and lately I've been making some videos about the Rodecaster, which I'm recording this podcast with right now. And those videos have been getting really popular because everybody's stuck at home making podcasts. And that's brought in different people. And in general, people love it because I specifically try to approach those videos not as, hey, I'm an industry professional telling you how to do this stuff, but hey, I'm somebody who wants to get good audio. Does this thing help me get good audio? Like, that's kind of the approach that I'm that I'm taking with it, which is more relatable. And then I've made several videos that compare different microphones. And those videos are where I feel like I've gotten more of the audience that Gary's gotten, where again, most people are nice and positive, but it's a lot of like, no one in their right mind would ever use this thing. It's overpriced. It's a piece of junk. And I'm like, it checks off so many boxes and makes my life so much easier. And I've used it for a year. I can attest that it's not a piece of junk. Or if I'm comparing microphones, people saying one is, no one would ever touch that one, and it's just for like suckers who buy into stuff, and this is the only one people would really use. And it's like, wow, this is so subjective. How are you speaking so concretely? There's like this weird gatekeeping and stigma around all this stuff. And I know the best thing is to not engage with those. If I think someone is mistaking, I will usually try to correct them like diplomatically, or just at least explain where I'm coming from. And most people are very reasonable when you do that. But I had this one comment the other day and I deleted it. Otherwise, I would read it to you. But this guy left a comment on a video where I'm comparing two microphones. I'm comparing the microphone that I'm talking on right now, which is the Rode Pod mic. It's a $100 microphone. And I compared that with the Shure SM7B, which is a $400 studio microphone. The Shure microphone, the more expensive one, is pretty legendary. It's been around for decades. It's if you saw it, or if you're not familiar with it and you saw it, you would recognize it, because it's like, think of like the Joe Rogan podcast, the microphone that he's talking into, any radio show, podcast, lots of, music studios, recordings. It's a very legendary microphone. But Rode came out with this pod mic, which is like a competitor in terms of genre, but not in terms of price necessarily, because it's 1/4 the price. And so I did a video comparing that. How does this $100 microphone compare to this $400 microphone? Should you spend $400, or is $100 enough? And that's kind of how I approached it, because that was the question I had, especially if you have something like I do, which is this Rodecaster. It has 4 microphone inputs. So if this pod mic is good enough, you can get 4 of them for the price of one of the Shure microphones. That's kind of a cool setup, and I feel like Rode did that on purpose. So anyway, the video is pod mic versus SM7B. In that video, I'm really clear that the Shure microphone, the SM7B, the more expensive one, sounds better. You can just hear as I'm switching back and forth, it sounds better. But the pod mic doesn't sound bad, and especially when you're not comparing it side by side to another microphone, the pod mic sounds really good. It's just when you switch back and forth between these two specific mics, that's when you really start to notice, ooh, this one sounds a lot more richer and fuller. This one sounds a lot thinner. And of course, a lot of it has to depend with your voice too, and your settings and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that was the whole video. And this guy wrote a thing that was like, no one in their right mind would choose that microphone. Like, the Shure's the only one to get. He kind of explained why. And then he said, this review is completely useless because it wasn't fair. And I was like, okay. If somebody comes on my channel and just like drops the F-bomb at me, I just delete it, because that doesn't need to be there. If somebody offers like constructive criticism, I like to leave it, because I think that that's valuable. And I when other people read through video comments, I like them to be able to see that and make their own opinion and all that. So this comment, despite I thought it was really rude to call something I had worked on useless, but I thought he was making points and coming at it with a perspective that other people might have. So I wanted to respond, and I was like, okay, this is how I set up the video. This is why this one thing was this way. This is why this other part was another way. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I feel that it's not accurate to call. I feel it's not fair to call the video useless. But I appreciate you wanting people to have the best info or whatever. And then he wrote back and just kind of kept going and was like, okay, well, this one point I agree with, but this, this, I forget what the points were because I deleted all this stuff. But he was like, okay, I'll concede this one point, but these two you're wrong on. And then he's like, I'm a studio engineer and I've been setting this stuff up for 15 years, and what you're using is complete, it's complete garbage. It's not what anyone would actually use. And I had to write back and go like, I can see that you're really passionate about audio quality, and I love that. But this is as a professional studio engineer, this is not the video for you. Like, this video is for people like me who are on a limited budget, want the best sound they can get, and are wondering, is this $100 option good enough, or do they need to spend the $400? That's very different than the person who's setting up a professional studio with like a corporate budget behind them. And then he came back and went in this weird tangent where he then said that he accused me of doing like the video being a secret ad for Rode, where like he said legally I was supposed to not disclaim, but declare, whatever it is. Legally, I was supposed to let people know that if it is an ad, it is product placement, and I didn't do so, and I was trying to deceive my audience. And because I used the word versus in the title, I was legally obligated to make it as scientific and accurate as possible. And I was like, that's not a thing. Like, one, this isn't an ad. I'm talking about a thing I borrowed compared to something I spent my own money on. No ads there. And two, like, just it is a versus because it's this versus that, but also like just saying versus in a YouTube title is not any kind of legal commitment. And, I just wrote back, I was like, I really don't think there's anything I can say that's going to change your opinion. This probably just isn't the video for you. Best wishes in your audio stuff. And then I think he just kept coming back. So I just, block user from channel, because I was like, okay, we can disagree, but now you're being like aggressive. And it is at that point where there's nothing I could literally go like, okay, here's $10,000. I'm sorry that you weren't happy with the video. And he would be like, well, why are you giving me $10,000? And it's just, you reach that point with someone. If you ever worked in customer service, I'm sure you can relate, where no matter what you do, they're going to be unhappy. And at a certain point, you just have to walk away and accept the fact that they're going to be unhappy. Anyway, I feel like that is a little bit of a taste of what Gary, the everyday dad, was getting on his channel with his camera reviews, and I can see why that kind of thing would be very exhausting. Luckily, I have no problem admitting that I don't know anything about audio, and I mean, I know a little bit about audio, but I'm not a pro. All my videos are taken from that angle, and I don't get a ton of those types of comments, so it's easier to let it go. But it is frustrating because Gary does the same thing with cameras, where he's not claiming to be the most professional person in the world. He's not claiming to know more than anybody else. In fact, it's quite the opposite. But just getting bombarded with that kind of stuff from like filmmakers, even though you're trying to just be a video person, would be really exhausting. And so what I have found is it was just sort of nice to tell myself, look, dude, you don't make films. Like, maybe one day you could. And sometimes even my students ask, like, do you ever want to make a film? Do you ever want to do that? And it's like, I kind of don't. I've worked on longer form projects and I've worked on bigger projects, and I don't really like them because they take so long. And that's just for me personally. I don't really like working on something for weeks and weeks and weeks or months and months. And by the time it comes out, you're so sick of it and you've been so close to it that you can't stand it anymore. What I love about YouTube is that I can have an idea, I can work on the thing, and then it can be done and I can share it very quickly. If I want to spend more time on it, if I want to spend a few days or a few weeks on something, I can. But if I don't want to, I can make a video today and share it with people today. And there's no other like planning, there's no other cooks in the kitchen. It's just sort of me doing that. And I love that. And I know that means I'm not going to get to make my own Better Call Saul, like, beautiful narrative story arc. But right now, that's not really a goal that I have. I love making interesting, entertaining, and helpful videos for people that look good and sound good. And I try to do something new and different in every video to kind of keep pushing myself forward. But I'm super happy doing that, and I have a lot of fun doing that. And that's okay. And so going all the way back to Insecurity, that's okay. Like, it's okay to just be happy making videos. I don't need to be a filmmaker. I don't need to please that filmmaking community. So what I learned was that leaning into just being a video production person was freeing in a way. It just broke down that insecurity of like, oh God, but I'm not a filmmaker. Oh, but I'm trying to be a filmmaker or whatever. And she's like, no, like, dude, I just really love video production. It's the best. The end. And, I think that there are ways you can approach that with many other things than YouTube channels and genres and niches and whatnot. But I think that that's just kind of like, why are you doing something? If it's something you enjoy and you like it, you put your own spin on it, that's really all that matters. It doesn't really matter if there's this unsupportive community out there. Even in an unsupportive community, I think you can find supportive people. And the more that you can seek that out, the more you can just do the thing that you enjoy, the happier and more content you will be overall. Like, yes, it might build up my ego to like make a film, but emotionally, I'm not going to like that experience. I'm going to be annoyed and bothered and stressed and tired, and like it's not something that I want to do right now. So why do that just to please somebody else when I could be doing something that I actually want to do that is still helpful and beneficial to other people? I would much rather spend my time on that. And that is a specific example of something recently, but it just kind of goes back to the idea of those insecurities and all of that stuff. Just really being in your head. And the more that you can shift the way you're approaching stuff and the way you're looking at things, the better and easier your life will become. And just feel free. And that feeling of freedom from yourself and the stuff in your brain is so nice when you realize like this thing that has been blocking me has just been in my head the whole time, and I can just say no and then it just goes away. It's like absolute magic. So kind of in that same note, I want to talk about gear of the week, which is a little bit different than it normally is. So usually I talk about one piece of gear that I like or that I'm using and that I feel has like added a lot of value over the past week or so. But this week I want to talk about 50 pieces of gear. Specifically, I want to talk about a video that features 50 pieces of gear from Jonathan Morrison. If you haven't watched Jonathan's channel, I will link to it in the show notes for this episode. He's been around for a long time. He's like a New York tech YouTuber guy. His videos are very high quality. If you know like MKBHD and that kind of genre of way too highly produced videos, like it's just beautiful stuff, way better than it needs to be. This is where Jonathan kind of fits in. He's been doing it for years, and he's also always seemed like a really nice guy. And then he did this thing on Twitter a few weeks ago where he said, hey, what's your favorite piece of gear under $50? And a bunch of people just put it up there, and I put this little Manfrotto tripod that I like. And then he sent me a message and said, like, hey, do you want to make a quick video about that thing? And I was like, oh, sure. And so he said, video just like 20 to 30 seconds, talk about why you like it. If you could do it this week, that'd be great. And he did that with 49 other people. So there were 50 of us total. And he smashed it all into a 30-minute video that jumps between person to person, 50 different channels, 50 different creators from all over the world, talking about different tools that they like. And then he even took it a step further. He has a pretty large channel, I think 2.5 million subscribers, something like that. And he took it a step further, and then in the description for each product, put that person's affiliate link. So if anyone clicks on the thing that I talked about to buy, I get the affiliate revenue instead of him. So he did that with everybody, which is really cool in a time when people are always kind of hurting for money, but when people are really stuck home, some people unable to work, and to have somebody with a large reach help out and use that to direct, audiences, direct revenue towards those channels, I thought was really, really cool. And then it just kind of proved, it's nice when you're a fan of someone and then they turn out to be really nice. It's always disappointing when it's the opposite. It was like when I met the Aquabats, my favorite band, for the first time, and they were just even cooler and nicer than I could have imagined. And it was like, oh, thank God. These people that I like and admire are actually worth admiring. It was just it was that sort of experience, and it made me feel so nice that somebody was doing something so positive for so many people. And it was really fun. It was fun to be a part of. It was fun to make a little 30-second video, because you have 30 seconds to try to communicate a point, but you also want to, I want to show what my style is because I know different people are going to be seeing it. So like, here's my B-roll footage. Here's my talking head. Here's what I look like. Here's what my videos look and sound like. And that was kind of fun. And then seeing that all smashed together, it was just like, I remember thinking like, I'm going to make this video and I'm going to make this little clip as good as I possibly can. And then watching all of them, like, God, everybody's are like amazing. So I know it's just a bunch of video production people, but everything looks so good and it sounds so good. And it's just really impressive what people can learn to do and create on their own. There's some really cool stuff in there too. Like I actually bought a couple of the items that other people recommended. So if you're looking to do a little online shopping or you just want to check out something cool, check out that video from Jonathan Morrison. It's 50 pieces of tech under $50 from 50 different creators. And I'm in there somewhere too. So I'll put links to all that stuff down in the description. Otherwise, I really want to thank you for spending time with me. Feel free to reach out. As always, you can leave a voice message at anchor.fm/enthusiasm. You can reach out to me at SoDarnTom on Twitter and Instagram. Of course, YouTube videos every Thursday morning on the Enthusiasm Project. And thanks for spending your time with me. I will see you next time.